Hey everyone, in this video I'm going to teach you how to play Picky Eaters. Picky Eaters is a strategic card game for 2 to 6 players, and in this video I'm going to show you the 2-player version. So I've got myself as one of the players and I've got this bot as the other player, and I'm going to go ahead and jump right in. I'm going to say no thanks to the tutorial and we're going to get to the main screen and explain how the game works. Alright, so once we get our cards, I'm just going to pause the game here. All right, it's my turn. Perfect. All right, so Picky Eaters is played with a special deck of cards, and this deck of cards contains recipes. So for example, Croque Madame, this is a recipe, okay? This deck also contains food items like rice and beans and tomato. And this deck contains special items like fancy silverware and hot plate, okay? So there's a deck of cards. There are 5 rounds in the game, and every round you're going to get dealt 5 or 6 new cards depending on the player count. And what we are doing in this game is we are trying to prepare recipes for picky dinner guests who are coming in the evening. So what's going to happen in each of the 5 rounds is that a new guest is slated to show up. We're going to know that guest's food preferences, and we are trying to prepare recipes to satisfy as many guests as possible, and we score more points the better we do at that. Okay, so let's look at some of these cards. Let's go through what we can do on our turn. It's a turn-based game, so me and this other player are just going back and forth till we can't do anything else, and then the next round starts, and so on. We play through 5 rounds, and whichever player has the most points at the end of those 5 rounds wins the game. So let's step through a few actions, okay? So, as I mentioned, every round a new dinner guest is slated to show up. So for this first round, if you remember, I closed that little pop-up that explained who was coming to dinner today, but Skylar is coming to dinner. Each guest has has recipes, rather, that they love, like, dislike, and hate, okay? And that's marked by those 4 sections on the card. So Skylar loves burrito and pupusas. That's why there's a heart next to them. Skylar likes croque madame, fish and chips, pizza, dislikes omelet, carbonara, surf and turf, and really really hates shepherd's pie. Okay, so if we prepare recipes for the guests, they will get scored differently based on where those recipes show up in that ordered list of preferences, and I'll get to that in a little bit. All right, so on our turn we can do one of 5 things, and I'm going to show you how to do some of those things in Ludio. The first thing we can do is we can shop. So what happens is every round some cards are drawn from the deck and put out in front of all of us, and that makes up the market, and we can shop for one card from the market. So for example, this is the market, these 2 columns here and these 3 rows, right? This group of 6 cards, this is the market for this round. So there's 2 bread, cheese, there's also a recipe here, a veggie burger. And so what we can do is we can shop and we can buy one of them. So let me just show you how to do that. So it's my turn in Ludio, right? I'm just going to click on one of the cards I want to play, so I can play the shop card. You can see that shop card appears over my face, so everyone knows I'm playing it. And I will buy, I guess I'll buy some bread. So I'm just going to click on the bread, and now the bread is in my hand. Okay, so let me pause the game here. Cool. So shopping is really straightforward action. The next thing you can do is you can discard 2 cards to draw 1. Okay, so if I were to play discard 2 to draw 1, it would make me choose 2 cards from my hand. I would get rid of them, and then the new card from the deck would be given to me. The third thing we can do is we can play a recipe. So for example, this recipe is a croque madame, and it requires 1 bread, 1 meat, and 1 egg. All right, and it's my turn again, actually. So in order for me to play this recipe, I need to have all these ingredients in my hand of cards. Okay, so I need bread, meat, and egg. I have bread, I don't have meat, and I don't have egg, so I can't play this. So in order to play a recipe, you need all the food items that make up that recipe in your hand, and that way you'll be able to play the recipe, and that recipe and all the food items that go into making it will get removed from your hand. The other way to play a recipe is if you are missing one of the ingredients, you can substitute it with 3 cards of your choice from your hand. The fourth thing we can do is we can pass. Passing means we are not going to play any more cards that round. So we're sitting out, essentially, till all the other players have also passed. And the final thing we can do is we can play one of our special items. So for example, if we look at fancy silverware, we can play this in the place of a recipe, okay? Or look at this hot plate. It says we can put it on an opponent's recipe to prevent them from replacing it. So there's a bunch of food items, there's a bunch of recipes, there's a bunch of special cards. As you play through a few rounds of the game, you will see what these things do. So let's actually get to the point where we can play a recipe, because that is instructive and it'll explain what some of these other cards are doing in the center over here. Okay, so let's see. Okay, let me shop for this recipe. And the reason I'm shopping for that recipe is it requires bread and beans and quinoa. I have bread and I have beans, and I can make up for the missing quinoa by discarding 3 of my cards, right? Notice that it's my turn again right after I shopped, because this other player, the bot, has passed, meaning they're not taking any more turns this round, so it's all us, okay? Okay, so I am ready to play my veggie burger. So I'm going to play my veggie burger, and it announces to everyone that I'm playing the veggie burger. Great. Now, I have to play my veggie burger to one of these 5 spots, okay? So I am the red player. I'm color-coded in red, and that corresponds to this red card over here, which corresponds to this row. So this is my row of recipes. Similarly, the other player is blue. You'll see that in a second. This is their row of recipes. So I have to place my recipe in one of these spots. Now, right now, all of these spots are open, so it's not really a big deal which one I choose. But what you can do in a game of Picky Eaters is you can replace recipes you've already played with new recipes. And you may want to do that because maybe some of the dinner guests prefer this new recipe to the old one that you currently have. Later in the game, there'll be spots taken up by recipes, and when you play to that spot, you are replacing that recipe with the new one, okay? So for now, I am going to play my recipe here. And my veggie burger is now there, and you can see it says discard 3 cards to replace the missing ingredient in your veggie burger. And I am glad that I have an extra rice and an extra tomato, so I'm going to click on those, and you know, I don't think I'm close to a croque madame anytime soon, so I'm going to click that, and I am going to confirm that, and then those 3 cards get discarded. And it's still my turn, right? Why don't I play my fancy silverware, which takes the place of a recipe. So a fancy silverware is a special item. That's another type of action. I'm going to play my fancy silverware here in another spot. And now I don't really want to discard 2 cards to draw 1. There's no real reason for me to do that right now, so I'm going to pass. And because all the players have passed, that concludes the round. And we're on to round 2. Okay, so we have a new guest coming. This guest has these preferences. And now let's take a moment to talk about some of the other nuances of the game, okay? So the first nuance is that at the start of every round, we draw 5 or 6 cards, but we can only have a maximum hand size of 10 cards. So what Ludio is asking us to do right now is discard till we have 10 cards left. Right now we have 11, so it's asking us to discard 1, and I will discard, you know, there's not a lot of quinoa in the deck, so it's pretty hard to make recipes with quinoa, so I'm going to discard the wrap. Alright, and we are back to the game. Now, let me pause here. We've covered pretty much all the rules at this point. I think the only thing we haven't covered is how scoring works. If you notice, in your box, and in everyone's box, there's a little number in the bottom right over here. And that number is your score so far, right? So I have a score of 3, and bot 1, who is the blue player, has a score of 0. How are these scores computed? First off, you get 2 points for every recipe that you currently have on the table. So I have 2 points for this, and fancy silverware doesn't count as a recipe. We'll get to that. So I have 2 points for my veggie burger. Then there are extra modifications based on how every guest ranks your recipe. So if we look here, Skylar doesn't really have anything to say about a veggie burger, so no modifications there. And neither of the guests have anything to say about my recipe, and the fancy silverware adds 1 point for each of my recipes. So I have 2 from the veggie burger just for playing it, and then I have +1 from the fancy silverware. If there were guests who loved or liked or disliked or hated my recipes, that would add or remove extra points. So if I just consult the rule book here to remind myself, yes, okay. So if your recipe shows up in someone's loves, right, it's it's a recipe that they love, you get +4, +2 for a like, -1 for a dislike, and -3 for hate. Okay, and that's for every single guest. So we look for every single guest, whether that recipe shows up in their list, and make the modifications accordingly. That is the game in a nutshell. Draw cards every round. You can take one of the 5 actions: shop, discard 2 to draw 1, pass, play a recipe if you have all the ingredients, so you have all but 1, and play a special item. And after 5 rounds, you'll have 5 guests, and when everyone has passed, that concludes the final round, and whoever has the highest score wins. So it's a really fun game. I've played it a number of times now. It was really fun to implement on Ludio as well, and works really well with higher player counts as well. So I hope you enjoy it, and it's a really fun theme, very intuitive to understand what you're trying to do. So have fun, and thanks so much. Take care.